Okay, so this second video is still on the worksheet wspm 8.5, solving equations by factoring and applying the zero product property. Specifically, this is for questions 19 through 26. So the first thing to do or to understand is the zero product property, okay? So what does the word product actually mean? Multiplication, all right? So zero product property is like the law, the truth, the fact. And we're talking about the fact of multiplying and getting the answer 0, okay? So what is the zero product property? Let's say that you had a certain number A times a certain number B, and the answer is 0. There's a truth about multiplying two terms and getting the answer 0. The truth is that either this first number has to be 0, or the second number has to be 0, or both could be 0, right? There is no way that you could have numbers, both numbers that are not 0. Like, I mean, if I had a 3 right here, what would B have to be in order for it to be 0? It would have to be 0. Or if B was 5, what would A have to be if B was 5? It'd have to be 0. So the truth, the zero product property, the truth is that when you're multiplying two numbers and your answer is 0, that means that your first number could be 0, or your second number could be 0, or both could be 0. So what I just did right here is actually applying the zero product property. All right, now what do I mean by that? Whenever you have two terms that you're multiplying together and you get it equal to 0, you could simply separate those two terms and create two simple equations of each of them being equal to 0. Okay, now I know that sounds kind of confusing right now. Let me show you an example of when this is beautiful. So let's pretend that we have this equation 3x squared minus 12x equals 0, and let's say that the instructions told you to solve. Why did I put Slav? Sorry. Solve. Dyslexic. Solve. So let's say they tell you to solve. Well, normally, what would we do to solve? Well, you'd get x by itself on one side, right? Now, the problem is, here's an x, but over here's an x squared. That messes everything up. Now, let's say this x squared didn't exist. Yeah, you could get x by itself, but the problem is you have two x's, and they're not even the same x. You can't combine like terms there. They're different types of x's. There's an x squared and there's an x. So whenever you have an equation like this, what you could do is factor. Right? Now, what do I mean by factor? What's in common in your first term and your second term? Right now, we're ignoring the fact that it's an equation, the fact that it has it equal to 0. Let's forget about that right now. Let's just focus on this quadratic binomial. What's the GCF? What could I pull out? 3 is the only thing I could pull out? Also an x, right? Now, why would I want to do that? Because if I pull out a 3x, what would be left on the inside? X minus 4. That would be left. Now, all I've done is I took this quadratic binomial and I rewrote it as a factored form, right? Now, what does that mean? I rewrote it so it looks like something times something. Believe it or not, this is the same thing as this. All I did was rewrote it. And now, because of the fact that it's an equation that's equal to 0, then I truly do have something times something equals 0, right? Now, because of the zero product property, if I have something times something and it equals 0, I could take the first something and set it equal to 0. I could take the second something and set it equal to 0. So this is true in any situation. I have this times this equals 0. I could set this up. 3x, that could be equal to 0. Or the x minus 4 could also be set equal to 0. And that's a beautiful thing. Why? Because you could solve both of them. Making a little bit of space here. Let's solve both of them. Well, on the left simple equation, you would divide by 3, 0. Divided by 3 is still 0. That's an answer. The other one, plus 4, x equals 4 is another answer. So believe it or not, for this equation, your answer, you have two answers. You have 0 and 4. So on the original equation, if you wanted to double check your answer, go ahead and plug in 0 right in there and right in there. That would give you 0 minus 0. Yeah, that equals 0. That's a check. It works. If you plug in 4 right there. What's 4 squared? That's 16. And what's 16 times 3? It's 48. And if I plug in 4 here also, that's minus 48. And 48 take away 48 is 0. So both of these answers actually work. You get two answers for this quadratic equation. Now, before learning how to factor, we wouldn't know how to do this. But now we know how to factor. And why do we factor? So we could do distributive property backwards, pull out the GCF. That way you could truly have something times something equals 0. So you could split it, that first something equals 0, and the second something equals 0. That way you have two simple equations instead of one complicated equation. So you have two simple equations, you get two simple answers. All you got to do is double check it and make sure that it works. We're done. What do you guys think? Do you guys understand this? The zero product property, once again, is simply something times something equals 0. You could split them and set them each equal to 0. Actually jump back to our worksheet and work on the second half of this worksheet. Let's take a look at the bottom part, the second half. This second half says solve each equation using the zero product property. Check your solutions. Now, I threw in these little notes using zero product property, all right? Because that's what we want to do. When we take a look at this problem right here, you need to recognize that it really says something times something equals 0. That means that your first something could equal 0, or your second something could also equal to 0. This is zero product property. Something times something equals 0. The first something could be equal to 0. The second something could be equal to 0. So now the complicated equation becomes a super easy equation. Now this is the easiest you could get. Why is that? Because it's already in factored form. This is already factored for you. You're going to have to factor on your own, but this one's already factored for you. So you need to solve this guy. What? That's already solved for you, right? There's nothing to do here. What's your answer? X equals 0, right? On the other one, you want to solve it, you're going to have to go plus 8, and you're going to get X equals 8, and that's your second answer. So you get two answers. What you need to do is double check it. So what if we took 0 and plugged it in for both the X's? 0 times anything, 0 times negative 8, that's going to be 0. So this one works, all right? And plug in 8 right here. 8 times 8 minus 8, that'll be 0. So 8 times 0 really is 0 also. So this one also works. So both of them are your answers, okay? So you're probably thinking, why am I double checking? Sometimes, especially in the future when you get to Algebra 2, you're going to end up with extraneous solutions. That means extra answers that don't work. Like maybe you plug in 0 and it just doesn't end up working out. Then you would cross this out. This would not be your answer. Sometimes you get two answers like this and you check both of them and neither of them work. You'd have to cross both of them out and say no solution. But in this case it does work. Both of them work. So you have those two answers right there. What do you guys like to do? Honestly, number 20 is easy, 21 is easy, 22 is easy. You know why? Because those are all factored for you. They're all factored for you. Even 22, this one's so easy because you're going to set this. This one already has this binomial times this binomial equals 0. I know that we're used to distributing, but let's not distribute. Because you have this times this equal to 0, you simply split it. A minus 9 equals 0. 2a plus 1 equals 0. And then you just solve both of them, right? So you get rid of the minus 9 by going plus 9 plus 9. So you're going to get a equals 9. That's one answer. Maybe. We need to double check it. And the other one, you subtract 1, you get 2a equals negative 1. And then you divide by 2, and divide by 2, you get the final answer, a equals negative 1/2. And that's your other answer, maybe, if it works out. So we need to double check it. Plug in 9 right here and 9 right there. It doesn't matter what you get over here because right here 9, take away 9 is 0, and 0 times anything will give you 0. So you double check. That one does work. So a does equal 9. Let's see if negative half works. Well, if I plug in negative half here, I'll end up with negative 9.5 times, and over here, negative half right into there, that'll be 2 times negative half, and then plus 1 after that. Now, if I did go 2 times negative half, the 2's cancel, you do end up with a negative 1 plus 1, which is 0 right there. So 0 times 9.5 or negative 9.5 would still be 0. So this one also works. Double checked it. Both answers are correct. Those are easy. Now, the more challenging ones, they're not even more challenging, but are these guys over here where you need to factor. Now, first of all, if you want to use the zero product property, let's do 26. If you want to use the zero product property, you have to first make sure that it's equal to 0. Now, right here, it's this equals this. There is no equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is rewrite it. I'm going to subtract 3x, cancels, subtract 3x. I can't even combine. I can't take away 2x squared, take away 3x. They're not alike. So I'm just going to rewrite it. 2x squared minus 3x. And now it really is equal to 0. See, I want the equal to 0 there. Why? Because I'm going to factor the left side of this equation. What could I pull out? What's my GCF of this quadratic binomial? What's my GCF? What's in common in both terms? Is there a 2 in common in both terms? No. Is there a 3 in common in both terms? Is there anything in common in both terms? X. So let's pull out the x. And what would be left on the inside if I pull out an x? 2x minus 3, correct? Equals 0. Now we really do have something times something equals 0. Something times something equals 0. So I'm going to use the zero product property to take these guys and split them and set them each equal to 0. So that outside x is now going to be set equal to 0. The inside 2x minus 3, that's also going to be set equal to 0. Okay, so I've split them. Now let me solve both of them. Wait a minute, this one's already solved. That's an answer. How about the other one? Yeah, let's solve it by adding 3 here, adding 3 over here. We're going to end up with 2x equals 3. Final step would be to divide by 2, and divide by 2. So x equals 3 halves. X equals 3 halves. So what we're supposed to do technically is to go back to the original and see if it works, right? So when we plug in 0 for x squared, that's going to be a 0. Plug in a 0 here, that's going to be a 0. 0 take away 0 really is 0. So this one does work. You double checked it. That's an answer. Now the 3 halves, let's see if it works. We're going to have to plug in 3 halves into this x squared. So when you go 3 halves squared, that's really 3 halves times 3 halves, which is 9/4. Okay? It's going to require a little bit of work. So we really have 2 times 9/4, and then minus, let me write in black, minus 3 times 3 halves. And that should give us 0. That should give us 0 as a final answer. Whew, it's going to be ugly. So when I focus in on this equation right here that I'm double checking, the 2 and the 4 cancel. You'll have a 2 left over on the bottom, so you really have 9 halves. And over here, the 3 times 3, if you put the 3 over 1, it'll be 3 times 3 on top. That will give you a 9, and 1 times 2 on the bottom is 9 halves. And 9 halves take away 9 halves really is 0, so that one does work also. So both answers are correct. So I believe we understand now how to do all of these. You want to first set it equal to 0. This one is set equal to 0. You want to factor out what's in common and then split them and solve. Okay? So to solve these guys, you factor, split, and solve. Again, factor, split, and solve. Factor, split, and solve. And when I say split, that means set each of them equal to 0, then solve your simple equations.